notice in many of the comments is that a lot of us don't know who Jesus really is. Granted that you may come from a denomination that teaches Jesus was a created being rather than God himself, but this is not about what your denomination tells you. It's not even what I tell you or anyone else for that matter tells you. This is about what the Bible tells us about Christ. This is who Christ claimed to be in the Bible. I always think that John chapter 1 should have settled the argument, of who Jesus really is. But apparently it's not enough to convince many Christians and so-called believers that Jesus is God in the flesh and not just some created being, created by God to bring creation into existence. So in this episode, believe it or not, I'm going to spend time talking about Jesus' claim as God and what the Bible tells us about the deity of Christ. So without further ado, I'm going to dive into places in the Bible, passages that talks about his deity. Okay? John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was fully God. Okay, I think that's really, really clear. Now, I don't usually have any qualms with Bible translations that you're using because in most cases, you don't really see a big problem, big differences in terms of the context. But if your Bible translation is saying something like this, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God, I suggest you to buy another translation out there. Just throw away this one, okay? Because something is wrong. I'm going to tell you straightforward, okay? John chapter 1, verse 18. Let's continue on. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one who is himself God. Okay? John chapter 1, verse 14, just going a little bit back. See, it says here, now the Word became flesh and took residence among us. We saw his glory, the glory of the one and only, full of grace and truth, who came from the Father. In the Old Testament, the glory of God represents the Lord himself, Yahweh himself. Let me just cite a couple of examples. In Exodus chapter 16, verse 7. In the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your murmurings against the Lord. Did you notice that? There is a distinction between the glory of the Lord and the Lord, because he heard the murmurings of the Lord. Did you notice that? Exodus chapter 24, verse 16 to 17. The glory of the Lord resided on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the seventh day, he called to Moses from within the cloud. Did you notice that? The glory of the Lord was covered in the cloud for 6 days, and on the seventh day, he called out to Moses. Okay? Now, the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on top of the mountain. The same goes with Leviticus chapter 9, verse 6. This is what the Lord has commanded you to do, so that the glory of the Lord may appear to you. And notice that? Okay. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 28 says here, like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds after the rain, this was the appearance of the surrounding brilliant light. It looked like the glory of the Lord. Now, if you've read Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3, it says here, the sun is the radiance of his glory, the representation of his essence. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Son of God title. Son of God is a title symbolizing royalty, a divinely appointed king representing God. Okay. In the Old Testament, this was used as a regal, a regal title that is given to a king. Okay. In Chinese culture, I know this is familiar with us. Familiar to many of us, this kind of title, Son of God, Son of Heaven, actually, in Chinese culture. In Egypt, pharaohs were considered to be sons of Ra, the sun god. Greco-Roman usages, they also have it. Certain Roman rulers were designated as sons of God. Okay, Claudius is an example of that. Then you have Tiberius, Claudius, Vespasian. All these people, a lot of them. Okay. So the point here is that the Bible uses this same title to represent the divinely appointed representative of God. In this case, the King, the Messiah. Because in chapter 9 of Isaiah, verse 6 to 7, it tells us here, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father." Did you notice that? It's as if, the Son is the Father, and he is also God. He's also called the Prince of Peace. All these titles were attributed to this Son that was given to us. Okay. These are all descriptions of rulership if you continue on reading the verse in verse 7. Now, the Jewish understood what this title means because both the authors and the readers understood what it means, just like what I told you a while ago in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. The Son is the radiance of his glory and the representation of his essence, and he sustains all things by his powerful word. And so, when he had accomplished cleansing for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. Again, kingship language is what's going on here. Okay? In Matthew chapter 16, it says here, verse 15, it says here, "He said to them, 'But who do you say I am?' Simon replied, 'You are the Christ, the Son of the living God.'" John chapter 1:49, it says here, this is Nathanael, who answered Jesus, saying, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel." You see, they understand this title. Okay, look how the Jews respond to him. Matthew chapter 2, verse 2, it says here, "Where is he who is born King of the Jews?" Oh, sorry, this is not a Jew because these are the wise men. Okay. But nevertheless, it's the same. They understood that when you talk about the Son of God, this is talking about the King of the Jews. That's why they came to worship him, right? Matthew chapter 14, verse 33, it says here, "And those in the boat worship him, saying, 'Truly you are the Son of God.'" They understood this title. Even the high priest, when Jesus claimed to be the Son of God. Let's check out the passage here. Matthew 26:63 to 66. "But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, 'I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, Son of God.' Jesus said to them, 'You have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven.'" And what did the high priest do? He tore his robes, and he told them that he has uttered blasphemy. Did you notice that? Because he claimed to be God. That's why he was. That's why they said. That's why the rulers of this people, the high priest, said that it's blasphemy. John chapter 9, verse 37 to 38. These people worshipped him. Same goes with Matthew 28, verse 9. Same goes. Matthew 28:16 to 17. Luke chapter 24, verse 50 to 52, during his ascension. Now, if you only know Jesus' opinion on worship, you know that he doesn't tolerate idolatry. Look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 10. What did he tell Satan? "You shall worship the Lord your God and serve him only." If he didn't think that he was God, he would be like Satan, accepting worship. But he accepted worship because he believed that he is God. He knows that he is God. Okay? His disciples know that he is God, or at least understood him to be God. Look at Peter in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 1. John chapter 20, verse 28. They got their theology straightened out. Saul, which later would be known as Paul in Acts chapter 9, calls him the Son of God. Philippians chapter 2, verse 5 to 7, it explains to us that Jesus, although he was in a form of God, he did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped. but emptied himself in order to become just like us humans, right? Let's take a look at what about the claims of Jesus. In John chapter 8, 57 to 59, he claims to be I am. He claims to be existing even before Abraham, and they picked up stones and they want to throw him with stones. Because that's how you treat someone who is blaspheming. You stone them to death, right? Because he claims to be I am, the one who was talking to Moses in the burning bush in Horeb. John chapter 10, verse 30. If you just read that whole thing, you're going to notice that he doesn't shy away from the claims of God, and the people wanted to stone him. Okay, he even mentions Psalm 82, verse 1, that entire thing. He claims to be the one in the divine council, the God who the one who appeared in the middle of the divine council to hold judgment against these sons of God. And I recommend that you watch this episode here, here or here. I'll probably put it there. Okay. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7 to 8. Look, it says here, he is returning with the clouds and every eye will see him. Remember what he told the Pharisees just a couple of verses ago, the previous verses that I just showed you. Look at what he says here. I am the Alpha, the Omega, says the Lord God, the one who is and who was and who is still to come. If you don't believe this, if you don't believe that this is Jesus Christ, let's just go to Revelation chapter 2, verse 8. To the angel of the church in Smyrna, write the following. This is a solemn pronouncement of the one who is, and the last, and the one who was dead, but came to life. Right? Interesting. These are all titles for God, the first and the last. But then he was dead and he came back to life. Even Yahweh, or the Father, called the Son God. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 8 to 9 says here, but of the Son he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. Right? You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. O God, your God. So God, your God, has anointed you over your companions with the oil of rejoicing. Now, I cannot deny that there is a distinction going on here. So my point is, I'm not trying to force anyone to believe what I say. What I do ask is that you set aside what you're told and examine the text for yourself. Prayerfully consider the text. Don't just avoid the passages that are theologically uncomfortable for you or your denominational beliefs. Accept the text as a whole, not just the ones that you agree with. Okay, at the end of the day, you're accountable for yourself. You can't blame your pastor or your priest for not doing your own homework. The simple fact is, Jesus claimed to be God, and he is presented in the Bible as God himself. You either accept this or reject the whole thing, but don't accept it. But don't accept what is only comfortable for you. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.